In part 1, we saw Emily Johnson humiliated in front of the crowd at Gate B12. Her passport was burned to ashes, her name mocked, and her dignity dragged through the dirt. Yet through all of it, she stayed calm. And now, with one slow movement, she has revealed the truth. Emily is not a helpless traveler. She is the chief FAA inspector. And the tables are about to turn. Gasps filled the gate as Emily's badge gleamed under the bright lights. Passengers who had doubted her froze, their phones catching every second. The Federal Eagle emblem, embossed in gold, silenced even the loudest whispers. Alexis Martinez, who only minutes before was smiling with confidence, now looked as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Her smirk was gone, her skin pale. This can't be real," she stammered, her voice trembling. Emily's movements remained calm and deliberate. She placed her Department of Transportation credentials next to the badge on the counter. Her voice, quiet but firm, carried across the entire gate. Emily Johnson, Chief Inspector, FAA Criminal Enforcement Division, badge number 4782, Federal Law Enforcement Authority under Title 49. The silence that followed was almost painful. Daniel Evans, the gate manager, stepped closer, his hands trembling as he bent to examine the badge. The holographic seals glimmered. The raised lettering was sharp and precise. No one in that room could deny what they were seeing. You're a federal agent," Daniel whispered. "Chief Inspector," Emily corrected. The weight of those two words sent shockwaves through the gate. The same crowd that had stared at her with suspicion only moments ago now stared with awe and disbelief. Emily's voice sharpened, controlled and precise. "You just witnessed a federal crime. Your employee deliberately destroyed federal identification during an active investigation." The crowd erupted into a storm of murmurs. Phones zoomed closer, capturing Alexis's face as her confidence collapsed. Jessica Wilson, the supervisor who had spoken so harshly earlier, grabbed the credentials with shaking hands, her eyes darting over every detail as if she might find a flaw. But the badge was real. The authorization was real. Emily's photo stared back at her from the laminated card. This has to be fake too," Jessica muttered desperately. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out her government-issued tablet. With swift precision, she accessed the Federal Verification Database. "Would you like to confirm it yourself?" she asked coldly. "Commission number FA 78,292,024. Enter it now." Jessica froze. She didn't type a single key. The security officer, Ryan Cooper, stepped forward, his voice respectful now. "Ma'am, I apologize for the way this has been handled. You're clearly authorized." Emily turned her head toward him, her tone softening slightly. "You followed procedure, but Miss Martinez did not." Alexis backed away, her legs unsteady. I didn't know. I thought it was fake. It looked suspicious." Emily leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with Alexis's. "Ignorance is not an excuse for destroying federal property, and it is not an excuse for discrimination." The crowd cheered quietly, some clapping in agreement. Others shook their heads in disbelief, stunned at how fast the tables had turned. Emily opened her federal notebook, her pen moving with steady strokes. "Alexis Martinez, employee badge 4471, deliberately destroyed federal identification at 7:23 a.m. Central Time. Witnesses present. Approximately 200 passengers. Evidence: ashes of U.S. passport in waste bin, recorded on multiple live streams exceeding 500,000 viewers." Every word she wrote was precise, unshakable, and official. A voice broke through the crowd. Savannah Collins, a deputy U.S. Marshal, pushed her way forward in tactical gear, her boots striking the floor with authority. She nodded respectfully toward Emily. "Chief Inspector Johnson, we're here for the federal arrest warrant." Emily gestured toward Alexis. "The suspect is right here." Alexis stumbled backward, her hands raised slightly, her voice shaking. "Please, I didn't know! It was a mistake. I thought I was protecting the airline." Savannah's tone was firm. "Mistake or not, you committed a federal crime. You will be detained immediately." The marshal stepped forward, securing Alexis's wrists in restraints. The same hands that had confidently burned Emily's passport now trembled as cold steel closed around them. Phones caught it all. The same internet audience that had watched Emily's humiliation now watched Alexis's downfall in real time. Comments flashed across Avery Carter's live stream. "Justice. She messed with the wrong woman. This is history." Emily remained steady, her eyes on the evidence, her notes, her responsibilities. She felt no need to gloat, No need to raise her voice. She simply did her job. Hannah Miller, the corporate vice president, rushed in with a team of lawyers. Her expensive suit was wrinkled from rushing through the airport. "What is the extent of our liability?" she demanded, her voice sharp with panic. Emily lifted her head slowly. "Under federal law, destruction of government property carries penalties up to 10 years in prison and fines of $250,000. In addition, your company faces corporate liability for civil rights violations. And there are 17 prior complaints on file against this employee that you ignored." Hannah's face drained of color. Her lawyers whispered frantically, their tablets open, numbers scrolling across their screens. Emily continued, her tone flat, her words cutting like steel. "This is not a single mistake. This is a pattern of deliberate indifference to civil rights violations, and it will not be ignored any longer." The gate fell silent again. Even the passengers who had been cheering quieted down, realizing the weight of what they were witnessing. For Alexis, it was over. For Emily, it was only beginning. She looked down at the ashes of her passport, fragments scattered like confetti around the waste bin. With gloved hands, she carefully collected them, sliding them into evidence bags. Every piece mattered. Every burn mark told a story, and that story would soon be told in court. The echo of boots on polished floors filled the federal courthouse in Chicago. The heavy double doors creaked open, and the courtroom fell silent as officers escorted Alexis Martinez inside. Her once proud airline uniform had been replaced with orange prison scrubs. Shackles rattled at her ankles as she was guided to the defense table. She looked smaller than she had at gate B12. Her sharp tone and proud grin were gone. Her eyes stayed low, avoiding the crowd of reporters, lawyers, and federal officials who filled the room. Cameras clicked softly, capturing the fall of a woman who had once barked orders and burned a passenger's passport without hesitation. On the other side of the room, Emily Johnson sat in the gallery. She wore a simple navy suit, her badge clipped neatly inside her jacket. She carried herself with the same calm presence she had shown that morning at O'Hare. But her eyes carried a deeper weight now. She wasn't just a victim. She was the lead witness in a case that would shake the entire airline industry. At the bench, Judge Amanda Harris adjusted her glasses and looked down at Alexis. Her voice was clear, every word ringing across the courtroom. "Miss Alexis Martinez, you stand accused of willful destruction of federal identification, obstruction of justice, and interference with a federal investigation." The courtroom grew tense. Alexis lifted her head for the first time, her lips trembling. "Your Honor, I didn't note." The judge raised a hand. "You will remain silent until called upon." Alexis sank back into her chair, her eyes filling with tears. Liam Thompson, the federal prosecutor, stood and addressed the court. His voice was steady and sharp. "Your Honor, this case is not complicated. The defendant deliberately burned the passport of a federal agent in front of hundreds of witnesses. The entire crime was captured on multiple live streams, reaching more than 500,000 viewers across social media. Physical evidence was preserved. 17 prior complaints of discriminatory behavior were ignored by her employer. This was not an accident. This was deliberate." The jurors leaned forward, some shaking their heads in disbelief as Liam continued. "We are not only here for Ms. Johnson, though her humiliation was seen by the world. We are here because discrimination, abuse of authority, and disregard for law cannot be allowed to stand at our nation's airports." He turned toward Emily. "Chief Inspector Johnson, please take the stand." Emily rose, her steps measured as she approached the witness box. The oath was spoken, and she sat down, her calm presence filling the room. "Inspector Johnson," Liam began, "can you tell the court what happened on the morning of July 14th at Gate B12, O'Hare International Airport?" Emily's voice was steady. "I approached the counter like any other passenger. I provided my valid passport and boarding pass. Instead of following standard procedure, Miss Martinez accused me of carrying false documents. She then produced a lighter and deliberately set my passport on fire." Gasps rippled through the courtroom, even though many had already seen the video. Hearing it from Emily's mouth carried a new weight. "And how did you respond?" Liam asked. "I remained calm," Emily said simply. "I reminded her that she had just destroyed a federal document. I asked her to verify my identity through the system. She refused. She told me to kneel on the floor to pick up my boarding pass." The courtroom buzzed with outrage. Judge Harris tapped her gavel for silence. "Did you attempt to show your federal credentials at that time?" "No," Emily replied. "I was conducting an undercover investigation into discrimination at boarding gates. Revealing my credentials too early would have compromised the operation. I endured the humiliation until the moment cast tass." required me to act. Liam nodded. And when did you reveal your identity? When the evidence was undeniable and the humiliation had reached its peak. I placed my badge on the counter beside the ashes of my passport. At that moment, the entire room realized the truth. Liam stepped back. No further questions, Your Honor. The defense attorney stood nervously, adjusting his tie. Inspector Johnson, my client, did not know you were a federal agent. She believed she was preventing fraud. Would you not agree that mistakes can happen? Emily's gaze did not waver. Mistakes happen when someone follows procedure incorrectly. What Miss Martinez did was not a mistake. It was discrimination. It was arrogance. And it was a crime. The defense attorney shifted uncomfortably. But she thought... Emily cut him off, her voice sharper now. She thought she could treat me as less than human. That is not a mistake. That is a choice. The courtroom erupted again. The judge's gavel struck the desk 3 times before silence returned. After Emily stepped down, Prosecutor Liam played footage from Avery Carter's live stream. The jury watched Alexis's mocking smile, her order for Emily to kneel, the match striking, the fire consuming the passport. They watched Emily stand tall even as her dignity was attacked. They watched Alexis laugh. The evidence was undeniable. Hours later, Judge Harris returned with the verdict. Her voice was heavy with authority. Miss Martinez, this court finds you guilty on all charges. For destruction of federal property under 18 U.S.C. Section 1361. You are sentenced to 36 months in federal prison. For obstruction of a federal investigation, you are sentenced to an additional 2 years of supervised probation. Alexis collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face. She whispered over and over, I didn't know. I didn't know. But it was too late. Emily sat quietly in the gallery, her hands folded on her lap. She felt no joy in seeing Alexis's fall. Justice wasn't about revenge. Justice was about change. And she knew this was only the beginning. The gavel had fallen in Chicago, and Alexis Martinez was led away in handcuffs. Reporters outside the courthouse shouted questions, cameras flashed, and the world took notice. But the story did not end with her prison sentence. In many ways, it was only beginning. News channels replayed the live-stream footage for days. The headlines spread across screens. Gate agent burns passport of FAA chief inspector. Social media platforms were flooded with clips of Emily Johnson standing calmly while her passport turned to ash, only to later reveal her badge. Millions watched, shared, and commented. What began as humiliation had become a moment of history. In Washington, D.C., at the Department of Transportation, leaders gathered to respond. Madison Parker, the Secretary of Transportation, stood before microphones with Emily at her side. No traveler should ever face discrimination at our airports, she declared. What happened to Chief Inspector Johnson at O'Hare was unacceptable. Today, we announce new measures that will ensure it never happens again. The camera shifted to Emily. She stepped forward, her voice calm, her presence steady. I did not go through that experience for myself alone. I endured it so that the truth could be seen. The humiliation I suffered is the same humiliation that many others have faced quietly, without cameras, without witnesses. That ends now. Behind her, Tretz displayed the new law, the Aviation Civil Rights Enforcement Act. Airlines across the country would now be required to install bias monitoring systems at boarding gates. Agents would undergo federal anti-discrimination training. Complaints could no longer be dismissed. They would be tracked, investigated, and punished. The airline involved in Alexis's crime faced immediate fines and federal oversight. Hannah Miller, the corporate vice president, stood before her shareholders in shame. We ignored complaints, she admitted. We failed our passengers, and it has cost us millions in penalties and years of federal monitoring. At O'Hare's Gate B12, where it all began, change was visible. News screens displayed live statistics of customer interactions. Agents wore cameras connected to federal servers. A plaque had been placed on the wall, dedicated to equal treatment under the law. Travelers stopped to read it, to take photos, to remember the moment that reshaped the industry. Daniel Evans, once the gate manager, now held the title Federal Compliance Director. His voice carried less arrogance, more humility. We process thousands of passengers every day, and now every interaction is monitored. Complaints have dropped by 89%. Discrimination cannot hide anymore. For Avery Carter, the teenager who live-streamed the entire scene, life had changed too. What began as a quick video turned into activism. She became a student ambassador, teaching young people how to document discrimination safely. At a high school assembly, she stood before hundreds of students. I never thought my video would matter, she admitted. But it showed the world the truth. It proved that even young people can hold power when they speak out. Emily watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. Her office at the FAA headquarters was larger now, her title expanded. Director of Civil Rights Enforcement in Aviation. On her desk sat a frame containing a small piece of her burned passport. The edges were black and brittle, her photo warped and half gone. She kept it there as a reminder not of her humiliation, but of the change that came from it. Her team had grown from 12 investigators to more than 40. Together they launched audits across airports nationwide. Reports of discrimination were no longer ignored. Airlines that failed to comply faced massive fines and even the loss of their licenses. In Congress, Emily testified about her experience. She spoke slowly, simply, so that every lawmaker could understand. What happened to me was not an isolated act, she said. It was part of a larger pattern. My passport burned in public, but thousands of others had been burned in silence. This law is for them. The courtroom conviction of Alexis Martinez became legal precedent, cited in dozens of later cases. Judges pointed to it as proof that discrimination against federal officers or any traveler would not be tolerated. Internationally, the story traveled far. The United Nations, through Commissioner Victoria Evans, praised the reforms as a model for other nations. Soon, airports in Europe and Asia began exploring similar systems. Emily's burned passport had sparked a global movement. But not all of it was policy and politics. The story also touched ordinary people. At a community center in Chicago, Alexis herself, after serving 28 months in federal prison, spoke to a group of service workers. Her voice cracked as she admitted her mistakes. I thought I was doing my job. I thought I could tell who belonged and who didn't. But I was wrong. I destroyed more than a passport that day. I destroyed my own dignity. I hurt someone else's. Her words carried regret, but also a lesson. The very woman who had humiliated Emily was now teaching others about bias. Emily never attended those talks. She didn't need to. She believed justice had already been served. Instead, she focused on the future. She reminded her team that vigilance was the only way forward. She encouraged them never to let anger lead the way, but evidence, patience, and law. Quiet strength, she often said, is louder than rage. At a civil rights summit, she addressed a crowd of students, activists, and travelers. My passport was burned, but my authority was not. What was meant to erase me became the very proof that we needed to bring change. Dignity can survive even in ashes. And from ashes, new laws can be born. The audience rose to their feet in applause. Back in her office, Emily placed the fragment of her passport back in its frame. She looked at it for a long time, her reflection faint in the glass. Then she turned to her assistant, who stood at the door. Are they ready? Yes, Director, came the reply. The airline executives are waiting for the annual compliance summit. Emily stood, straightened her jacket, and walked out with calm steps. She knew the world was still watching her, but she didn't carry the weight with fear anymore. She carried it with purpose. The ashes of her passport had become more than evident. They had become a symbol, a reminder that no one, no matter their job or their power, had the right to strip another human being of dignity. That legacy, she knew, would outlast her. And so, the story that began with humiliation ended with transformation. Dear viewers, you've seen how Emily Johnson turned humiliation into justice, and how the ashes of a burned passport became the spark for change across the world. If this story touched your heart, and you enjoy watching powerful stories like this, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us grow stronger and continue bringing you stories that inspire, challenge, and move us all.